Good morning, friends, and welcome to New Garden Friends meeting. What a joy it is for us to be together. Friends, you are welcome here at New Garden Friends meeting. No matter your age or race, no matter your sexual orientation or your gender identity, no matter your politics or where you may be on your spiritual journey, whether you are a longtime Quaker or whether this is your first time worshiping among friends, you are welcome here. I want to also say welcome to those who are worshiping in person this morning, to those who are worshiping on Zoom, and to those who are joining us on Facebook Live. What a wonderful thing it is that we can be worshiping in so many different ways together. My reading for this morning is from Britain Yearly Meeting, Faith and Practice. I'm reading from the section of advices and queries. I'm reading queries 37 and 38. The queries about integrity. Are you honest and truthful in all that you say and do? Do you maintain strict integrity in your business transactions and in your dealings with individuals and with organizations? Do you use money and information that is entrusted to you with discretion and responsibility? Taking oaths implies a double standard of truth. In choosing to affirm instead, be aware of the claim to integrity that you are making in your affirmation. If pressure is brought upon you to lower your standard of integrity, are you prepared to resist that pressure? Our responsibilities to God and our neighbors may involve us taking unpopular stands. Do not let the desire to be sociable or the fear of seeming peculiar determine your decisions. Consider first your integrity. Friends have a long commitment to the practice of integrity. Here at New Garden Friends meeting, as within many modern communities in the United States, we often refer to our principles and traditions as testimonies. These testimonies are the guideposts that we use to live our lives as Quakers. And here at New Garden Friends meeting, we will often talk about 6 testimonies of faith: simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship or care for the environment. Of all of these testimonies, the one that has always seemed the most foundational to me is the testimony of integrity. It is our sense of integrity that leads us forward to work for peace and justice in our world. It is our sense of integrity that leads us to care for our environment. It is our commitment to integrity that leads us to live lives that are intentionally simple and to honor and uplift cooperation and community building. Integrity is the foundation of our other commitments of faith because it is integrity that leads us to examine our lives. It is integrity that calls us to be faithful, that calls us to question the decisions that we have made about how we are living our lives. Integrity is often most simply understood as being truthful. Truth speaking is a difficult practice in a world that has an admiration for falseness. Whether it is the falseness of advertising or the falseness of systems of greed in our world that encourage us to do whatever it takes to get ahead. The Quaker commitment to honesty and forthrightness is at odds with our world because of its countercultural nature, it can sometimes be a hard practice to live into. Our society encourages us to tell white lies. It encourages us to misrepresent ourselves, to live lives that are glossy and photoshopped. I know that I have to regularly ask myself if I am being fully truthful with those around me, because I have a tendency to want to soften the truth as I talk to others. And also if I'm being fully truthful with myself. Truthfulness is the practice of not telling lies to others, but it is also the practice of being honest and saying things that are hard to say. And this can be most challenging with the people who we love the most. Integrity calls us to say things like, "It hurt me when you did that." It calls us to say things like, "I don't think that behavior is acceptable." It calls us to say things like, "I need you to work with me so that we can both be better at that." It calls us to say, "This is what I really want." It is hard to have these conversations with our friends or our loved ones or our neighbors, but it is also hard to have truthful conversations within our faith communities. I speak often with other clergy people and other faith leaders. And one of the topics that come up regularly in those conversations is how conflict is unfolding within their church or faith community. And sometimes, as we're sharing stories and examples from our churches or faith communities, there'll be a story shared about how someone is just behaving badly. There are stories of people angrily storming into their pastor's office and demanding that things be done differently, or council meetings ending in yelling matches, boards of deacons who yell at each other in the hallways. These stories are not uncommon when clergy people gather together to support one another. And when I hear these stories, I think of our testimony of integrity. How here at New Garden Friends Meeting, we have a commitment to integrity, a commitment that would lead us, ideally, if we are upset, before we react in anger, to think through our reactions. Our commitment to integrity also calls us to hold one another accountable to better behavior. I wish more of my colleagues in ministry had the ability to say to those who were behaving badly, I hear your pain and your anger, but how you are behaving right now is not acceptable. So often, my colleagues in ministry do not feel capable of saying that to those in their community who are behaving badly. But being able to hold one another accountable to good behavior is part of our commitment to integrity, just as much as our commitment to truth speaking. I have to tell you all that often I leave conversations with my colleagues who are faith leaders feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the general good behavior of members of New Garden Friends meeting. Truthfulness and holding one another accountable to good behavior, plain speaking, and honesty. These things are incredibly challenging, but in many ways, they're often the easiest part of our commitment to integrity. The much harder part of integrity is how integrity calls us to wholeness. Living a life of integrity means living a life that is faithful to who you truly are. It means not caving to the constant pressure of our world that wants to shape our self-image and our voice and our politics and our ideas of morality. The world exerts huge pressure upon all of us. The pressure to think and to act like others. The pressure to look like others. The pressure to love like others. The pressure to construct lives that look like the lives that our neighbors are leading. Now, some of this social pressure is okay. It's part of what keeps humans from doing things that hurt others or hurt our communities. But much of the pressure that our society exerts upon us is simply normative. And those norms are based on the idea that whiteness and straightness and maleness are the ideals. Integrity asks us to resist these norms. It asks us to examine for ourselves ideas about dress and mannerism, lifestyle and language, behavior and relationships. Integrity urges us to ask questions like, why is it that some people find it so upsetting that a pastor would be a woman with pink hair? What ideas are shaping this reaction? Obviously, this is a silly example, but it represents the kind of thinking that integrity calls us to. And actually, the answer to the question about pink hair is kind of a complex one. The answer to that question is in part this. Many people, if not most people, when they think of a pastor, they think of an older man, a straight older man, a straight older man who is cisgender, or in other words, identifies with the gender that he was assigned at birth. For a lot of people, this older, white, male ideal dresses and talks in a certain specific way. He probably wears a tie on Sundays. He probably wears a sports jacket. So when people see a pastor who is a woman or a younger person, or a not straight appearing person, for some people, their mind tells them that there is something strange and wrong. Some people, when they are faced with something that does not adhere to their norms, they become uncomfortable and they assume that there is something inappropriate happening. And that, of course, is just one small piece of what might be happening in those moments, because there are also theological reasons that people object to female pastors. There are also theological reasons that people think that pastors should dress and behave in certain ways. There are cultural and traditional issues at play. But it is true that people often react badly to those who appear or act in ways that are unexpected, different, or unfamiliar. But the practice of integrity calls us to do better. It asks us to unpack our assumptions about other people. It asks us to look deeper at the world that we live in. It asks us to examine why we believe and do the things that we do, and to hold those beliefs against a higher standard, the standard of goodness, of righteousness, of love and justice. For me, when I try to unpack and test my beliefs, I also hold them up against what I know about God. I believe that our God is a loving God who delights in the incredible diversity of humanity. And I believe that all people carry within them the light within, that divine spark that means that every human has intrinsic worth. Now, I want to be clear, my feelings have never been hurt by how people have responded to my hair or appearance. And indeed, appearance is a very minor issue to consider when we consider issues about bias and prejudice and societal norms. But sometimes appearance is connected to deeper issues. I have a friend, another clergy person, who is a Black woman who has faced criticism over and over again about her dreadlocks. I have a friend who's a queer pastor who has faced relentless criticism about how she does not appear feminine enough in how she dresses and acts. You can see how these issues of appearance can be tied to deeper issues about prejudice and justice and bias in our society. Integrity calls us to question our assumptions. And sometimes it calls us to take unpopular stances, as we heard in our queries for this morning. If we have examined our world, our neighborhoods, and our social groups, and if we have found something that is unfair or unloving or unjust, integrity calls us to do something about it. Not just to say that it is wrong, but to do something about it. It calls us to speak up and to take stances against systems that hurt others. Quakers have done this over and over and over again in countless ways. We have taken unpopular stances against wars, against the enslavement of fellow humans, against segregation, and against marriage discrimination and homophobia. Quakers have also failed to live up to our commitment to integrity, often out of fear of the social or financial or other repercussions of living into this commitment. It is hard. to stand against the social tide of your community. And Quakers as individuals and as communities have often failed to have the courage to do this. It can be especially hard to stand against the tide of social and cultural perspective if you or your loved ones are not immediately impacted by the injustices that are taking place. And again, this is where our testimony of integrity calls us forward and challenges us. Our commitment to integrity calls us to care, even if you are not personally impacted. Even if no one who you love is personally impacted, we are still called to care. I am mindful today, as I am every day, of the ways that I am failing to live up to my commitment to integrity. I am also aware that integrity is not a rigid law, and it is not intended to create guilt in our lives. Instead, integrity is a song that is calling us persistently and lovingly back to being the best that we can be. It calls us towards a vision of our world, a vision of a world where honor and respect for all is the norm. It calls us to create a world where the goodness of each person is honored, where love is uplifted, and where every person can flourish. My prayer for all of us this first day is that we work a little harder in the days to come to ask ourselves hard questions about integrity. Maybe we be willing to work and struggle towards this goal of wholeness. And may we have a more open mind and open heart in doing this work. In the days to come, may we think hard about our own prejudice, our own bias. What we have always been taught is right and good and proper and appropriate. And may we have the courage to follow in whatever direction integrity leads us, no matter how challenging it may be to take that stance. Friends, my prayer for each of you this morning is that you may be your true self, the true self that God created you to be, a self that is good and whole, a self that does the best and that acts out of love